It took me just over an hour to drive from Atlanta to LEJ. I couldn't help but admire my wife's determination as she made this trip every Saturday. I think the sex was good. Maybe, just maybe, it was something more. I didn't know because I never asked her. I do know for sure that Darlin had been meeting Clayton Mankey at his cabin in LEJ for over 6 months. We were very well known in Atlanta's social circles because of my wife's involvement in charity. She insisted on us attending openings, banquets, and fundraising events for everything that came up. This not only demanded my attention but also my money. I loved my wife, but I reached my limit. After quite expensive weddings for our 2 daughters, I hoped to relax a bit. However, Darlin needed something more, so she started seeking ways to indulge her ego elsewhere. She met Clayton Mankey at one of the fundraising events. I think I realized it from the very first evening, but I didn't bother confirming my suspicions until several months later. If she had tried to meet him in the city, it would have been a disaster. She was too well known to sneak into a hotel. Moreover, she would never go to a motel or his apartment under any circumstances. The cabin was perfect for them. After a long trip, I reached a single-lane dirt road that led about 3 kilometers through the mountains to a log and stone cottage. Clayton had a lot of money. He was a contractor specializing in large government projects. Besides earning money, he apparently knew how to invest or use it wisely. Most of the land between the asphalt road and the cabin belonged to Clayton. I'm sure he had plans for the future. I drove up to the cottage. I needed to do something, and I needed to do it quickly. With small clippers, I cut the telephone wires coming out of the box and leading into the cottage. I neatly tucked the ends of the wires into the holes so that it wouldn't be noticeable that they had been cut. There was no cell service near the cabin. Now there was no landline either. 20 minutes later, I returned to the main road. It was cloudy all the way. Darlin didn't ask where I was going when I left early. I knew she would leave in about an hour, as usual. We never questioned each other about such things. I think that was a sign that our marriage had fallen apart. Where the road turned towards the cottage, there was a gas station with a snack bar. Actually, it wasn't a gas station, just a snack bar with a few pumps in front of it. I was lucky and got a booth near the entrance with a good view. About half an hour later, a big black Hummer appeared on the road. Clayton always liked to arrive in style. Gas prices meant nothing to him. 5 minutes later, Darlin turned off the road in her Lexus GX 470. And then the rain started. It wasn't an ordinary rain, but one of those that last all day and never stop. I needed to hit the road as soon as possible before it became impassable. I'm sure Clayton wasn't concerned about muddy roads, but Darlin's Lexus wouldn't fare as well. At that moment, it didn't matter because they weren't going anywhere. What struck me about this encounter was the timing. Tonight we had a fundraiser for saving the Brazilian 3-toed sloth. I'm almost certain it wasn't for that, but it was something equally frivolous. She had been planning and preparing for over 3 months, yet still found time to sneak away on the day of the event to see her lover. I must admit she did an excellent job organizing the event. Even if she wasn't there, everything would have been perfect. My car wasn't as reliable on the road as Clayton's Hummer or as elegant as Darlin's Lexus, but it would get me where I needed to go if I didn't dawdle. I paid the bill and followed my wife and her lover up the mountain. In reality, the ascent wasn't that steep, just the road was devilishly winding. Trying to bulldoze a road in such mountains is not easy. You have to rely on landmarks whenever possible, and that's not always easy. A merciless rain poured down. I had covered half the distance to the cabin and decided to stop where I could turn around. The parka protected me from the rain, but by the time I got there, it was a bit stuffy inside. Darlin and her lover stayed in the cabin for about 30 minutes. I was sure she planned to make this visit shorter than usual, so I immediately got to work. In fact, it didn't take me much time at all. All I did was cut the valve stems on both cars. Today, they couldn't fix or change the tires for anything. By the time the rain stopped, the roads would be so bad that no sane tow truck driver would even attempt to get there. Their only way out would be to walk to the snack bar and find some alternative form of transportation. Of course, they wouldn't even realize what was happening until they were done making love. They didn't have a landline or cell service. If he had internet access, it was probably through a phone line. Of course, he could have had a satellite phone. I had to seize this opportunity. That's enough from me. The rains were still pouring. 20 minutes later, I was already on the 575 bus back to Atlanta. My stunt had no real reason, but I just felt low. Darlin and I have been together since college. I moved to Atlanta from Pennsylvania to work at one of the state's most prestigious accounting firms. In less than 10 years, I had my own accounting company specializing in the food service industry. We handled accounting, payroll, taxes, and even retirement programs. Some of our clients became national, and we grew with them. Our lifestyle grew along with the money I was making. Sometimes I felt it was hard to keep up with everything. Everything was fine until Darlin decided to spice up her sex life. Of course, I could be wrong. Actually, Clayton was richer than me. I wasn't sure what interested Darlin, his money or his body. I must admit he was more attractive than me and seemed to be in better shape. I think working construction helps keep you fitter than sitting at a desk all day. That son of a bitch had more hair than me. I mean, I haven't reached the point where I have to comb my hair again, but it's not as thick as it used to be. I really didn't care why she did it. I just wished it wasn't so. Tonight promised to be splendid. I couldn't wait to find out if Darlin would come or not. If she came to the end, she would be excited and out of sorts. As I've said before, there was no reason to do what I did. I reached the highway, and the rain was still pouring. I planned to leave Atlanta right after the party. All preparations were made in advance. 2 months ago, I sold the business for cash and a 20% stake in the profits. 3 weeks ago, Darlin signed the papers to sell the house to my close colleague. He was aware of my situation and more than ready to handle any difficulties that might arise from the sale. He paid me $1 million in cash for the house, which was 3 times its value. Darlin thought she was signing documents to refinance the mortgage. There was no mortgage. My other preparations involved closing accounts, credit cards, investments, and pension policies. We had several collectibles in the house that I easily sold in advance. As I was leaving, I planned to take Darlin's valuables with me. I wasn't going to leave her $500,000 worth of goodies that I bought. Clayton Mankey was another problem. Besides being wealthy, he had good connections both locally and statewide. Although he wasn't one of my clients, I had no trouble obtaining information about my adversary. I tasked a small team of my best employees to gather everything they could about his enterprises. For Clayton, it was standard procedure, winning bids for government projects and making a decent profit. The major issue was that the accounting books didn't match up. The school district project would have cost them $3 million, but Mankey Enterprises would show they were paid only $2 million. Clayton managed to pocket $1 million easily, minus a few kickbacks. No one ever compared these two figures with each other. I couldn't allow Clayton to run into trouble with state or local authorities because they were just as complicit as he was. The tax agency, however, was extremely interested. They not only planned to bankrupt poor Clayton but also intended to compensate me. At that moment, I wasn't sure if I could get it, but maybe, if I was lucky, it would work out. When I reached Atlanta, the rains intensified. I estimated it would be another 2 to 3 hours before Darlin and Clayton realized their dilemma. I needed to prepare for the party. When I returned home, the waiters and other party participants were busy. Darlin planned to invite over 200 people. Luckily, the house was big enough to accommodate them. I just smiled and waved at the workers. They were professionals and I had no intention of interfering. I stood under the hot shower for a long time and began to pack my remaining belongings. Darlin would miss her valuables. I also cleared out my personal safe. I was glad I had a small collection of gold coins. The Subaru was in the garage, so at least I didn't have to get wet while loading it. Guests hung long plastic sheets all over the house. The day was drawing to a close, but due to the lack of sun and abundance of clouds, it seemed like night had fallen. The rain was dripping. By 5 o'clock, I was fully dressed in my evening tuxedo. My daughters and their husbands arrived early to make sure everything was going according to plan. They both asked where their mother was, and I just shrugged. When my phone rang, the first guests arrived. It was my loving wife. "Robert, I'm so sorry, but I'm having some car troubles. I'll come home as soon as I can. Is everything okay? Where are you? I'll come and pick you up." No, stay there with the guests. I'll try to get back home as soon as I can. I'm really sorry. What happened to the car? That darn thing cost me more than 50 grand. I expected it to be reliable for that kind of money. I've already arranged for the auto service to take care of it. You don't need to worry. Damn it, Darlin, where the hell are you? Robert, calm down. It doesn't matter. What matters is that our guests are taken care of. She was not going to tell me where she was or who she was with for anything. Are you alone or is someone with you? I'm alone, but I'm fine. For God's sake, stop worrying about me. I'll be okay. Both of my daughters felt relieved hearing that their mother was okay. I smiled to myself, imagining her walking from the cabin to the highway in the rain and mud. This rain was sent by a heavenly angel. Darlin must have felt miserable at that moment. Unhappy, soaked, dirty, and tired. About an hour later, the phone rang again. I had to apologize to the guests and step out into the hall. Robert, what the hell is going on? I gave 3 different credit cards to the rental agency, and they all got declined. I can't rent a car with a credit card. Why don't you just call a taxi? There was an irritated sigh on the other end of the line. It's too far for a taxi. I don't need any trouble, Robert. I just need to know what to do about the credit card issue. I probably won't be able to solve it until Monday. Why don't you just go home with Clayton? There was silence on the other end of the line. I couldn't even hear her breathing. I waited for a few seconds, then heard her hang up. She didn't answer my question. The evening went fairly well. The girls had to leave because of their babysitters. When Darlin came in, there were still about 10 guests left. She looked awful. Her hair was as disheveled and dirty as her clothes. The rain had washed away most of the dirt, but reddish-brown stains remained. I stood there, smiling, with a beer in hand, for the first time that evening. Judging by how she walked, it seemed like one of her shoe heels had broken. She kicked them off and grabbed a drink from one of the trays on the buffet table. You did this, didn't you? You bastard. I took a big gulp of beer and smiled. You'll pay for this. I swear, you'll pay. The waiters were busy trying to clean up as our last guests left. They looked at her, but strangely, no one said anything. I'm glad to see you made it home safe and sound. I stayed to let you know that I'm leaving. I couldn't leave without being sure you were okay. What do you mean, leaving? Exactly that. I sold the business, sold the house, and closed all the accounts. That's why your credit cards weren't working. Darlin threw the glass across the room. It smashed against the wall, much to the horror of the cleaners. You stupid son of a bitch. Remember that half of everything belongs to me. I won't let you screw me over. I worked just as hard as you did to achieve what we have. I earned half, and I'll get it. I finished my beer and carefully placed the empty glass on the table. All right, dear, you'll get half of everything, only if we divorce. I have no intention of doing that. Do what you must. I had to walk for over 2 hours in the rain and mud to get to the road. 2 damn hours, and it's all because of you. What were you doing there, darling? Why did you go to LEJ to spend the day with Clayton Monkey when you could have just slept with him right here at home? By God, I wouldn't have cared. You bastard. You heartless, worthless bastard. I hate you. Well, I'm glad that's over. I have a flight at midnight. If you need to reach me, call me at. I'm sorry. I just remembered there's no place you could call me. I suggest you dismiss the household staff because you won't be able to pay them. Also, the couple who bought the house is moving in at the end of next week. Maybe you'll want to find yourself a place to stay. I don't recommend going to the Claytons. His time here is short. Perhaps one of your daughters will take you in. What do you mean Clayton won't be around anymore? Why would he leave? He's on top of the world. I smiled as I walked out the door for the last time. My accountants and lawyers made sure all my taxes were sorted and paid. From the government's perspective, I was leaving the company clean. All I cared about now was getting as far away from Darlin as possible. It wasn't that I had nothing to share with her, I just didn't want to share with her. I had many options, but I decided not to choose. I made a list of places that interested me, and it seemed reasonable to check them all out. Each place could easily take a year to explore. I decided to start with Belize and move on from there. After 5 years, I would have a pretty clear idea of where I wanted to live. I had several people more than willing to keep me updated on how things were at home. 2 weeks after arriving in Ambergris Caye, I made a few phone calls. The first one was to my eldest daughter, Grace. Dad, Mom is furious. Beth and I tried talking to her, but she refuses to explain anything to us. The only thing we could get out of her is that you stole all her jewelry and left her with no money or credit cards. She hasn't been home for the past few days. We don't know where she is. Have you tried calling her? I think her cell phone was switched off. Oh, that's true. I forgot. All communications are down at home, so that's probably why she's not there. She might be with Clayton. Who the hell is Clayton? Oh, I'm sorry. I suppose she didn't tell you. Clayton Mankey is your mother's lover. Clayton Mankey? He's been all over the news for the past few weeks. The FBI and some other people are after him. He was arrested once, but he posted bail and disappeared. What does my mom have to do with him? I'm not sure. It's either about sex or money. If he's gone missing, I assume your mother is with him. I promised Grace I'd stay in touch with her and Beth. I made 4 more calls, and the information was the same. No one knew where Darlin was, and no one knew where Clayton was. It seemed obvious they were together. Clayton could walk away from his business and still have enough money to live the rest of his life. Of course, with his situation, that wouldn't fly in the good old USA. I had a restless night. The next day, I had 2 dives planned. I needed something to occupy my time, so I decided to go scuba diving. This happened right after the first dive. It started raining. Not just rain, but a real downpour in Chattahoochee. We sat in the diving boat and waited for it to pass. All I could think about was the cabin in LEJ. It was a bad sign. The second dive was shorter than the first. When we returned to shore, the rain was still falling. The dock was a few minutes' walk from my apartment. Before heading back, I quickly ate a bowl of clam chowder. The rain continued to pour. It seemed like Hector was always on duty. He was the doorman in our apartment building. I wasn't sure, but I think he worked solely for tips. I had no problem giving him something small if he did something that warranted it. We got along great. Mr. Terrell, are you not diving again today? No, but I definitely will tomorrow. Mr. Terrell, you had 2 visitors this morning. I told them you wouldn't be back until closer to evening. I think they'll come again. Here's what happened. No one knew I was here, and since I arrived, I haven't made any friends. Do you remember their names, Hector? No, sir, but I managed better. Hector pulled out his cell phone and pressed a few buttons. It was a great shot. They weren't posing for it, and it seemed they didn't know he took it. Clayton was wearing a Hawaiian shirt, and Darlin had a large straw hat with drooping brims. My wife and her lover found me and came to visit. It's amazing what a person can achieve with enough money. I handed Hector a 20 and headed to my apartment. I didn't have too many things to pack, so I had time to call the U.S. Embassy. They confirmed that they were indeed interested in Mr. Mankey. Not only the tax office was looking for him, but also the passport department, which wanted to know what documents he was using. He had to surrender his passport to get out on bail. 20 minutes later, I was on my way to San Pedro Airport. I preferred the small airport a bit more. It was raining all the way there. American officials will be waiting for Clayton at the apartment. Extradition to the States was inevitable. They showed no interest in Darlin, so I assumed they would simply drop her off without money or credit cards. I became curious if she had a return ticket. 2 days later, I comfortably settled into my new villa in Phuket. I feared my life would be dull without work and family. I was wrong. It won't be long before Darlin and Clayton figure out where I've gone. This time, I'll be ready. I'll also be vigilant. I planned to take a walk on the beach to enjoy the sunset, but I had to reconsider. It started raining. It was a Chattahoochee rain. It was sent by an angel. I hoped Clayton was as smart as he seemed. I wonder how he planned to get back at me when he could have just walked away. The next few years will be amusing. I wanted to have dinner but couldn't. It started raining.